Good morning, everybody. I've been asked by quite a lot of people if I would say something on YouTube, and I'll post this on Instagram as well, about the various laws in Morocco as they affect charities and residency. So I will do my best. I do it with some background knowledge because when I was practicing and I was still living here in Morocco, I dealt with a lot of jurisdictional issues between Morocco and England, which also covered the jurisdiction between England and the EU. A lot of you will have heard, and it's very sad, but another charity here called Moroccan Animal Aid has been through a fairly traumatic week. Now, Moroccan Animal Aid was founded by two people. One of them, Lucy, was an Australian, and the other one, Fanny, was French. And during the time they lived in this country, they were here on the equivalent of a tourist visa. It was a tourist visa. I think Fanny earlier had been resident, but that had expired. So I want to deal first with the difference between being here on a short-term visa, a 90-day visa, and being resident. If you're on a 90-day visa, you are not permitted to work in Morocco. You're here as a tourist, and you can only stay for 90 days. It's that simple. Fanny did say on some broadcasts that she did, because she had been deported 5 days ago, and it appeared to be pretty brutal, but she was taken to the airport and put on a plane back to France. And she understandably was complaining about the lack of any procedure. Well, the reality is that the government does have the power to deport if you have overstayed. And it's no good saying lots of people overstay. Maybe they do, and maybe the government hasn't clamped down on that enough. But historically, if people overstayed and they wanted to leave Morocco, they had to go to the court and pay a fine before they left. In this case, Fanny was deported, and it is within the power of the government to do that. The people who came to arrest her and take her to the airport were not in uniform, but of course that will be part of the special police who do not work in uniform. And if you remember, some of you may, that last year there was a French journalist who was deported, and exactly the same happened. She was in Casablanca, plainclothes police went to her hotel room, took her promptly to the airport, and she was deported. Now, I think there may be a lot of misunderstanding because as far as I know, Moroccan Animal Aid is registered as an association in Morocco. But of course, if you are not resident, you can't be on the board of trustees. You can't be part of that charity. So while these two women founded the charity, it was up to the people they had on the board, who presumably I think were maybe Moroccans, to sort of, in a way, almost act as a cover. But it's the government still had the power, whether you like it or not, to deport if they felt fit. Now, what's the difference being a resident? I'm a resident, as indeed is my husband, and as residents, the government approves us to live in Morocco, and once we become resident and we have a residency card, we have all the laws that apply to Moroccans apply to us, and we have to comply with those laws. So in fact, if I had done something, I'm using this as an example, that had really angered the authorities in relation to animals, and they wanted to get shot of me, or they wanted to punish me, they wouldn't deport me as a resident, they'd put me in prison. That's a very important difference. The other thing that has arisen that I am asked about is how, excuse me, how associations are regulated here in Morocco. Now, you will remember that fairly recently I've been going on about how important regulation is. And I said that I felt that the government was going to clamp down on people who were not complying with the legislation. And I think in a way I'm being proved to be right. But this is part of the legislation. It isn't a convention. It isn't something that people have dreamed up. But as an association, and we rely very much on donations from abroad, we are bound every month to send a return to the General Secretary, to the government, stating how much money we've brought in and how we have spent it. And the law goes on to say that if we fail to do that within 30 days, they can just close us down. So, I mean, what we do is that we send that return every month. We also send a copy of our Moroccan bank statement and a copy of the running accounts we've kept for that month. So there's absolute transparency, and the government knows where the money has gone to. That in turn is then sent to accountants in England when the accounts are done for the Charity Commission, which is done by our trust in England. Now, thereby there is an important difference that I need to explain to you. There are 2 points that arise out of that. Just because you're registered as an association doesn't mean you're necessarily acting legally. And we wouldn't be if we didn't send our returns in and we didn't comply with the laws as they apply to associations. The other thing is, we know how difficult it is to bring money into Morocco. For example, to set up a PayPal in Morocco, the banks won't agree to do it. They won't agree to be the recipient bank from PayPal unless you are a company, and there are special rules that apply. So when people pay by PayPal, they usually pay into a European account. We also take donations through recognised organisations like DonorBox, CAF, and so on and so on. And in order to be able to take donations, we have to show that we have a regulated charity in the UK, in one of the countries that they recognise. And at the moment, they don't recognise Morocco. So in fact, what we did was establish a charity in England. You can do it in France or any other European country, or the States, so on. And it is called the Georgian Mule and Donkey Trust. And the refuge here, the association, is the Georgian Mule and Donkey Refuge. And money that comes through donations goes into the trust. The trustees in England approve it being sent over to Morocco, and we let those trustees know what we spend it on every month. That's a problem for charities who don't have a partner charity outside Morocco. It's very difficult to bring money in. And if you look at how you donate to those charities that are only registered in Morocco, you'll find that if you're paying it into PayPal, if you look at the PayPal account, and it only gives you the opportunity to donate, once. It doesn't say, do you want to make this a weekly or a monthly donation? You can bank that that is not a charity account. It's a personal account. And equally, very often money is paid into personal accounts in Europe. Now, if these charities were regulated, that would not be permitted when you sent all your income, as you're bound to, back to the government at the end of the month. And that's why I've been on my high horse saying it is so important for charities to be properly regulated, so that when transfer of money takes place, it's coming from a charity account into another charity account. That brings me on to the other question I was asked about jurisdictional issues, because as I understand it, they've certainly posted it on Instagram, that Fanny is in Paris and that Lucy tried to get back into Morocco. She has a baby now, a 5-month-old baby, and she was making her way back in via the UK. And when she got to check in at Stansted Airport in London, she was approached by armed police and told that she could not be, that Morocco wouldn't allow her to return to Morocco. And presumably she left the airport very distressed, which is understandable. Now, what that says to me is that the police in Morocco have a very good checking system, that they must go almost behind the open door, because how did they know that Lucy was going to be in England on that flight on that day? So there is clearly undercover work taking place between the various police forces. Now, I understand that, of course, they're trying to continue to raise money for their charity in Morocco, and they're also trying to raise money to cover legal costs because they want to take action against the brutality that Fanny said she suffered at the hands of the police here. And they will be seeing a French lawyer. Now, I am quite familiar with those jurisdictional issues. If they were going to take action, it would have to be against the people who committed the brutal acts, and that would be the police in Morocco. In order to do that, it would have to be filed in the Moroccan courts. You can't do that if you're not here. If you got a decision in France or England or America that you had been subject to brutality, an attempt could be, and you succeeded, an attempt could be made then to have that decision verified and compensation paid here in Morocco. But to do that, it would have to go through the Hague Convention, and it is very likely that the Moroccan courts would not accept that as a valid decision. It isn't easy to sue someone in Morocco from outside Morocco, particularly if you're not a resident. A European could do it, but they would have to be a resident here. So I think that will be a huge job. And if anyone ever wants to know, I have all the law and the regulations that apply to the jurisdiction in Morocco. Of course, something else that has to be taken into account, and this is just reality, is that relationships between France and Morocco, between Macron and the government here, are thawing slightly because France has taken the decision to support Morocco's position over the Western Sahara. And that is a huge diplomatic issue. And really, if they did want to complain about brutal treatment here, the best way is to complain through the French embassy that would take it up with Morocco. But in the present climate, it is very unlikely they would do that, because whether you like it or not, the government, the police, the authorities acted within their powers. So how on earth could there be diplomatic negotiations? I worry that what has happened, particularly over the deportation of Fanny, and her saying that she's often overstayed, this has never happened before, people always overstay, but the authorities will tighten up even more over tourists. There are certain laws about working in Morocco, and if you're here on a tourist or 90-day visa, you are not to work in Morocco. Those of us that are resident, because we are over 60, we have to sign a letter every time we renew our residency to say that we will not work in Morocco because the obligatory retirement age here is 60. When I was still practicing as a barrister and I was living here, and obviously I would earn money from time to time, but I only appeared in the English courts and I was regulated by the Bar Council. So any work I did was essentially in relation to England. And that never caused a problem for Morocco because throughout all that period, I was also represent the Moroccan government as well. But I couldn't, for example, go and work as a chef in a local hotel here. It would not be permitted because of my age. Now, of course, there will always be nuances and there will always be certain regulations that have to be looked at, but that is a general overview. I'm sorry to have taken so long, and I'm not here to attack MAA or any other charity. I'm trying very hard, because people have asked me to spell out the laws and the regulations as we understand them. So if there are any questions, I'm sure people will come back to me. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.